everybody. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Brian Roberts Inspired. I am super excited about our guest today. Our guest speaks, writes, and is, I would consider, an expert on the idea and thought of radical generosity. He's been featured in Fox News, New York Times, Forbes. He's collaborated with some of the most influential influencers out there like Gary Vaynerchuk and many more. Also is the author of Giftology, partners with some of the most iconic brands that exist in the world today. I am super excited to introduce to you and bring to you my good friend, John Ruhlin. John, welcome to the show.
Brian, thanks for having me, bro.
Well, tell us about what you're doing right now. I know you've got 10,000 different things going on that's electric and exciting, but what are some of the things right now that you're working on that you're the most excited about?
Yeah, well, I think, after 21 years of doing this, of helping people think strategically and helping them outsource their gifting and their love, we call them love bombs as of late. I still feel like I'm a kid in a candy store. I still feel like I just got back from San Diego, jumping out of an airplane for the first time with Navy SEALs. And we're starting to, get access to some of the world's elite in all of these different categories. And really the core of what I'm still excited about is helping leaders. A lot of leaders will take their clients to the Super Bowl or Pebble Beach or Masters or African safaris, but most people, they'll do that at a level 10, and then they send swag and trinkets and promotional products and bottles of wine, and they're not playing congruent. They're not leveling up all areas of their business. And so I still get excited about speaking on whether it's a Google stage or whether it's a small company stage, and inspiring people to, if relationships matter, then how you show up for them matter. And so I still get excited about inspiring people to go be more generous and more thoughtful in how they engage, whether it's clients, employees, suppliers. They're all just human beings. And I think a lot of times in business, we manage by spreadsheets, and we don't realize that on the other end of that spreadsheet is a human being, a family, a mother or father. And so the core of who I am and what I'm about, even 21 years later, in many ways is still the same.
I love it. So help our audience get an idea bring us back to the beginning. Like, I know a lot of people look at where you're at right now and they're like, oh my gosh, that's so out of reach. I don't know that I could, aspire to the level of where John Ruhlin's at. But take us back. You didn't always show up and work with guys like Gary and be on all these podcasts. How did this whole thing begin? And then how has it kind of morphed into where you're at today?
Yeah, well, I didn't grow up in LA or New York hanging out at country clubs, and my dad wasn't the commissioner of the NBA or anything. Like I grew up milking goats on a farm in Ohio. So 47 acres, heated our house with wood. Literally our whole farmhouse was heated with wood, 1 acre garden. So like when most people were hanging out at the swimming pool or maybe shooting hoops, like I was baling hay. So I didn't like the blue collar stuff, but I was, I learned a lot of grit, perseverance, work ethic, doing, it's cool to say, embrace the suck, David Goggins, all these things. I was embracing it long before it was cool. And so I was going to go I wanted to be a doctor. I thought doctors made a lot of money, and my life really changed because I went and interned with a company, Cutco. We both know Cutco knives. I had no idea what it was. They have this huge internship program. And I was like, if my buddy who is a seminary student can sell these knives, I can at least try. So I pitched my girlfriend's dad, the fourth appointment that I had. I pitched my girlfriend's dad. He was a rainmaking lawyer, and literally like referrals, deal flow, like, and when you grow up poor, you notice when people are generous. So he was always giving things away, like crazy stuff, and never asking for anything in return. It wasn't a tactical manipulation. It was just how he showed up for people. And so I pitched him the idea of the pocket knives. Cutco made these $100, $200 pocket knives. Thought maybe he'll have mercy on me, which, by the way, it's weird, awkward, uncomfortable. I'm pouring with sweat because I'm pitching my girlfriend's dad knives. It was just a weird thing, but he didn't make me feel uncomfortable. He was 60 at the time. He's like, John, I don't order the pocket knives, but I'd love to order 100 of paring knives. And I was like, you want to give a bunch of grown men dudes like a kitchen tool? Like, that's weird. Why? And he said, John, the reason I have more referrals, deal flow, access, engagement, loyalty, all these things that everybody wants, is I found out 35 years ago when I started the firm that if you take care of the family in business, whether it's internal or external, employees, clients, doesn't matter, everything else takes care of itself.
Wow.
So that was the lightning bulb moment. And so instead of buying beer in college, I was investing $500 a month in Cutco carving sets, a couple $100, $200-300 a piece. But I would engrave the name of the CEO, family name, send it off. And I would get meetings with $200 million companies by sending these off. Says, carve out 5 minutes for me. I promise to be worth your time. And so I started, by the time I was a senior in college, I'd become, out of 2 million sales reps in 70 years, we became their number one in the history of the company. Not because of the stupid knives. All to this day, New York Times are like, what's the hot new sexy gift, John, that your agency does for these companies? And I laughed. I'm like, the stupid knives. And they're like, come on, like, seriously, you sell knives in corporate America? And I'm like, most people have a significant other or family. Everybody has a home, a kitchen. Where do you, like, in 2021, what do you do when you really love somebody? Family, friend, client, employee. Where do you bring them? You bring them into the kitchen, the home. You break bread with them. You food and wine. When you have a celebration for a bar mitzvah or first communion, what do? Kitchen, food, wine. So the knives to this day are the delivery vehicle for this emotion. And so what I would say is, if a college kid who is like literally like milking goats straight off the farm can invest $500 a month, there's so many people that say, John, I can never do what you did. I'm not a good gift giver, or I'm not a good relationship builder. And I'm like, great, I wasn't either. My love language isn't even gifting, it's words of affirmation. I hated to speak for a decade because I would have diarrhea for 6 months leading up to a speaking gig. I'm not a speaker. And so I think there's so many people that make excuses that they could never be somebody. And really, like, I've just been pouring into relationships, and I started small and I worked my way up over the last 21 years. And because of that, I worked the gratitude muscle really, my gratitude muscle is pretty strong. It didn't start out that way. $500 a month, people are like, oh, like, I could afford that. Like, even a small business owner can afford $6,000 a year if they really want to. Cut out Netflix, cut out a few bar tabs. And so it's not, it's not always this huge number. It's amazing. People will drop, when they're hiring employees, they'll hire 2 extra employees. They'll drop an extra $100,000 in labor and overhead, but they won't invest $100,000 into their top 100 relationships. It's the same $100,000 as a business owner.
Why do you think that is? I hear you talk about return on relationship, ROR, and, business owners and a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of our folks that listen in, that's kind of the demographic, and they're thinking ROI. How do you explain that to somebody?
Yeah, well, I think that, ROI is awesome. And when you invest $1 in an employee, you're hoping that employee is going to pay back maybe 3x. As a salary, you invest in Facebook ads, and maybe you're hoping to get a 4 or 5x. But I can tell you, like, when I did the Cameron Harold Brooks Brothers story, he's one of the top business coaches in the world. I invested over the course of a decade, $25,000, which people's like, well, that's a lot of money on one relationship. And I'm like, well, if I want, and I did the Brooks Brothers experience of $7,000, all this other stuff, outfit his hotel room. And people think that's extravagant, but I'm like, if I wanted to hire Cameron for 1 year to be my sales rep, it'd cost me $2 million, and he'd still say no. $2 million. But because I love on and inspire and just doused him with no strings attached, like clothes and knives and whatever else, $25,000, I've gotten Cameron as a sales rep for a decade for $25,000. Talk about the steal of the century. Like, and people are like, well, what's the ROI on that? I'm like, well, the ROR is, it's been over 50x. Like, literally, it's 7 figures. Invest $25,000, make 7 figures. Show me, the investment portfolio. Show me another widget that you can buy. Show me another investment you can make where you can get a 50x. And we have clients that are literally getting 100x, 1,000x. But everybody wants to play the long game, but most people's long game is days. It's not decades. And so people are like, well, I did all these gifts. It didn't work, John. I'm like, that was 3 months ago. Like, we're just getting warmed up. Like, you don't take, it's like taking a girl out to dinner and immediately asking her to marry you. Like, that's dumb. Like, or expecting, sex that night. Like, that's not how relationships work. But in business, we do that. We think we can send something now we got to get something. And that wasn't a gift. That was a manipulation. Same as in your marriage. If you show up with a nice ring and expect something that night, like, how's that going to work out for you? Probably not real well. Right. And so human beings, people don't understand return on relationship means I'm going to make deposits over and over again in that relationship and that social capital account. And eventually I'll earn the right to ask, not expect, to ask for the referral. Most people want to send a gift after a referral. That's the dumbest thing in the world. Why? Because you're in the relationship business, not the transaction business. You give a gift after referral, you just turn that $1 million AUM into a tit for tat. Here's your $500 bottle of wine. So I think return on relationship is a bigger, longer term strategy. And sometimes it doesn't pay off. Like I might plant 100 seeds and 20 of them might turn into nothing. But the 80 that do turn into oak trees dwarf 1,000 times more than the people are like, oh, I didn't get a return on that. I'm like, maybe 15 years from now, that person will be in a different position of authority. They'll be at a different company. Maybe they inherit the next generation of wealth. But most people aren't playing the game that way, the chessboard. They're saying, what can I do today and eat? And because of that, they're losing out on the longer term opportunities that are a lot of times, the 100x, the 1,000x opportunities.
I think that's brilliant. And the word that comes to mind when I think of the concept and what you've embraced is radical. Let's go back for some of the listeners and people watching that haven't experienced the Brooks Brothers story or don't know that. You don't have to extrapolate the whole thing, but I think when I think of radical, I think, oh my gosh, like the conversation you had with your partner. Are you sure you want to do this? Would you put your personal income on the line? Like, what did you do there? And then if you could tie back in the whole concept of tchotchkes, trinkets, and being radical, being more powerful, more influential, more rememberable with the gifts and thought process of what giftology is all about.
Yeah. So the Brooks Brothers story was I met Cameron. He was this world-renowned consultant. I wanted him in my corner, not just as a client, but as a mentor. And yeah, I invited him to a dinner and a ball game, like everybody does. Like in business, dudes are the worst at this. It's like, hey, let's go to golf, let's go dinner, let's go round the golf. Like those are all fine, but it's like showing up for your wife on Valentine's Day. Like, do you get brownie points for doing that? No. Like those are table stakes. Show up on your anniversary. Like you don't earn brownie points with your wife or your husband. Like those are the like baseline.
That's so standard. That's what everybody does.
Hey, let's go for drinks. Hey, let's go golfing at my country club that I invest $50,000 a year in. All of those are cool, but nobody's like, oh my gosh, I've never went golfing at a country club before. Like people are like, that's not melting their face off. It's not radical. It's table stakes. And we do some of those things too. It's not like I never take somebody out to dinner, but I'm not like, whoa, Daddy Warbucks, I just picked up a tab at Morton's. Like, no, like that's the dumbest, like, no, like everybody, whether you're financial, insurance, widgets, pro sports, I don't care what the industry is. We all follow the same playbook. Tech, it's like going out to Vegas. Oh, I spent 10 grand on a sponsorship, or I spent 10 grand at a dinner. Cool. But so did the other 100 competitors that you're playing in you're swimming in the same ocean. So when I invited Cameron to the dinner, he could care less. So I'm like finding out, I'm like, what else are you gonna do when you're in town? I found out they love Brooks Brothers. And so that was the angle. I was like, he's not gonna get a time to go shop at his favorite store. So that's when I called my partner. I was like, Rob, we need to do this thing. He's like, it's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Like, no way. And then when Cameron's flight got delayed and he was gonna get in late, flying into Cleveland, call my partner back. I'm like, we got to do this. He's like, do you believe it enough that if it doesn't work, it comes out of your personal draw? Big deal.
So what were you doing? What was the pitch?
So he went to Brooks Brothers and I said, I want one of everything in a new fall collection, all your jackets, suits, belts, pants, shoes, everything. It was $7,000 in clothes in his size. And then we went out to the Ritz where he was staying to look like a Brooks Brothers store. Wow. So when Cameron got in, he didn't want to go to dinner or ball game. He wanted to go to bed. But when he saw the clothes and saw what had happened, like he came down, he said, John, whatever you want to talk about, for as long as you want to talk about it, I'm all ears. I've never had anybody treated me this way. So, what's funny is that most of the 25 grand that I invested in wasn't even the clothes. Cameron came back to me and said, John, I can't take all these clothes. Either you're going to tell me how much the clothes cost, or I'm going to round up by 50% and I'm going to send you a check for that. So that experience actually cost me no dollars. But most people are like, well, John, you had them. Why did you keep giving gifts? I'm like, it's like when you only give your wife jewelry on the wedding day, like you keep dating your wife. Most people show up for their clients after a deal's done, after referrals given. It's when you show up for your client, your center of influence, your mentor, your employee, like even with employees, it's the dumbest thing in the world. Hey, you've worked here for 10 years. Here's a catalog of crap that you don't want to pick something out with a logo on it. Honestly, that's 20,000 hours that person put into the company of blood, sweat, and tears. And you're giving them some crappy catalog or some paperweight or some clock with a logo on it. Thank you for the 20,000 hours. Here's a $47 crap thing you don't even want.
Never thought about it like that. Well, when you say it like that, it seems absolutely asinine.
It is the most asinine. So, but we do it because it's like just what you do, right? You like at Christmas, you give gifts. Well, we don't allow clients when somebody hires our firm to do gifting for all their employees or clients. I'm like, you are not allowed to buy a gift between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which is committing like Harry Carey for a gifting company, because they're like, that's when they make all of their money. It's when all retail makes all their money. And I'm like, you got to show up for people. The timing of the gift is just as important as what you're sending. So no referral gifts, no deal gifts, no anniversary gifts. It's like, hey, we've been in business 20 years. Here's a gift. Nobody cares that you've been in business 20 years unless it like involves them. And so the timing, the positioning, we won't allow people to put logos on gifts. They're like, John, that's branding and marketing. And I'm like, would you ever go to your best friend's wedding, and on the Tiffany's vase, slam compliments of UBS on there? Hell to the no. It'd be the tackiest thing in the world. Your wife would be embarrassed, would never let you live it down.
Yeah.
But in business, we do it and we call it branding and marketing. And really what it is you're trying to manipulate that person into thinking about you and advertising your brand, and you're trying to hide it as a gift. So when we do gifts, it doesn't say anything about the company. And people are like, well, John, they're not going to know where it came from. I'm like, if you give stupid stuff from China, you're right. A t-shirt, a polo shirt, a jacket, some golf balls. No, they're not going to remember where those came from.
So
but
true.
if you give handmade cutlery that costs $200 a piece, or you give a Rolex watch, if I give you a Rolex, Brian, do I have to put giftology on there for you to remember where it came from?
No.
Nobody.
I'm going to tell everybody about it, and it doesn't have to have your logo anywhere on it.
So every time you look down at your wrist, even subconsciously, you're thinking about the giver of the gift. That's why I don't call them gifts anymore. I call them love bombs. I call them artifacts. Because a gift, people think of swag and trinkets. Hey, what do you have for $87? And I'm like, this relationship's lifetime value is worth 250 grand to you, and your budget is $87.
So let's talk about that, because I think the dichotomy is people have framed gifting or love bombs from a dollar perspective, and they've never really put an emphasis to that like they probably should. So how do you redirect people's thought process on trinkets, tchotchkes to love bombs, artifacts, and get them over the investment that they're going to make there? Because it's not a spend, it's truly an investment.
Yeah.
Get people over that. Some of our listeners may not have $100,000 budget, to go out and shower their top relationships. So what's a good way to ease into that? Just think differently about that entire concept.
Yeah, well, I would say if you took your top employees or your top clients or centers of influence or prospects out to dinner, where would you go? McDonald's or Morton's?
Morton's.
You're going to go to Morton's, right? Now, it's not cheap. You're going to invest $100 a person, $200 a person, depending upon the wine and the liquor and all that stuff. You go to a really nice place, maybe it's $300. You're going to do things. If you're going to dress yourself, are you like going to Big Lots? No, you're going to go, if you're going to wear a suit, it's going to be a Tom James or a, Hilburn, or you're going to go to Neiman Marcus or Nordstrom or TJ Maxx. You're going to get something that fits nice and looks nice. If you drive a car, are you driving a beater from, 1988? No. All of those things communicate value and significance and credibility. And what most people don't realize, because people are polite, is if you do all of these other things at a level 10, and then people are like, oh, I'm a 7 out of 10 on gifting, but really they're -3. Because nobody's honestly saying your Starbucks gift card that you gave me was actually embarrassing to you and to me. I've sent you $500,000 in business over the last decade, and you think you're branding and marketing and appreciating with your gift card. Here's a piece of plastic, go buy your own thing. So what I don't think people understand is go back into the Old Testament, whether you're a person of faith or not. Kings would give other kings 10,000 head of cattle, because they understood that the value you place on the gift is the value you place on the relationship. Oh. So you don't have to spend 100 grand. But let's just say I had 10 grand to invest, less than $1,000 a month, which most even small business owners, if they're honest, they have that. It's just a matter of redirecting priorities. They'll spend on Facebook ads and tchotchkes and sponsorships and maybe an extra employee, whatever it is. But if you would take that $10,000 and invest it into your top 10 relationships, the secret sauce is you get Camerons, like the Brooks Brothers guy. to not just be a client. Like people think loyalty is sticking around as a client. That's not loyalty. That's passive loyalty. Active loyalty is where somebody is willing to stick their neck out and go advocate for you, become a sales rep for you. That's real loyalty. If you're loyal to your kids and they want to get into Harvard, are you like, well, I'll just pray about it? No, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call your buddies and you're going to try to find a way for them to get to Harvard because you're loyal to your kids or to your parents or to your best friend. You're active. Like people think, oh, gratitude on these things is like a passive thing. No, gratitude is an action. And so what people don't understand is you could take that same 10 grand, invest it into maybe 5 or 10 relationships, go all in on them year after year after year. And now you have 10 people that are actually actively loyal sales reps in your corner. And that's worth more than, I don't care, a million followers on Instagram. Who cares? It's the people that are in your corner that might be a few dozen or a few hundred that really matter in most people's businesses. And most people are like checking the box at Christmas. Hey, it's Christmas. We got to say thank you. Hey, Jim, what do you got for a budget? I don't know. I got $4 grand from last year. Let's buy peanut brittle for everybody. And that's what they end up doing because nobody's ever challenged them to say, here's an area of opportunity of leverage because people suck at it so bad. It's not that like there's not other ways to build relationships, but the bar is so low here that when you do it even at a level 5, it melts people's faces off because most people are getting the same crap with logos on it or the same stuff at Christmas or the same gift card. And so like like this is an area that's a blue ocean where you have no competition. And it's funny, the people that I'm meeting that are having some of the biggest success, I can think of Joel Marion, who has the $100,000 mastermind. He's like, John, I've been doing what you're helping companies do, like what people outsource to you. And now he's a great client of ours. He's like, I built a 9-figure business off of loving on people, no strings attached with these crazy gifts. And because of that, people run through walls for me and open doors for me. He's like, I did it in internet marketing. I did it in the supplement company that he's getting ready to sell. He's like, I'm now doing it in all these other areas. He's like, it's not rocket science, but nobody does it. So it stands out and it's memorable and it's a story worth telling, which is at the end of the day, when you're not in the room, you want people to look down at their wrist or look down at the block of knives on their countertop and say, have you ever met Brian before? Have you ever met John before? Like that's the trigger, that's the anchor that gets you talked about in all these circles that you're not even in.
Yeah, I think so. Lot right there, but I think 2 things that stand out for me. One, it's counterintuitive, from one of our vendors, and I get the same box of popcorn every year, and I almost re-gift it because I'm like, I don't eat popcorn. This isn't something that I would enjoy. It's every year like clockwork. So counterintuitive because they probably think, oh, Brian's a great client of ours. We want to make sure that, and it's branded with all their stuff on it, packaged real nice. But I almost like just re-gift it because the thought is nice and I appreciate and respect them thinking of me in the thought, but I see exactly now what you're saying of how the bar is so low. Mm-hmm. Just do something that's different, that's unique. And I think the hardest thing though, John, is the last part that you mentioned is being patient, not expecting anything out of it, right? Because if people say, man, I'm going to take my hard-earned dollars, I'm going to put it into this concept, I'm going to build advocates for my practice, for my business, but I've got to be patient in the return on relationship and not expect anything out of it. I would imagine that's the hardest thing. But man, after following you, hearing you, reading some of your stuff again and again and again, story after story after story, this works. And the bar is so low, right?
I know, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, people can do it on their own if they want to. And it's not, I mean, I see people applying it to their marriages, to their interpersonal relationships. It works. People are like, at Google, they're like, does this work in technology? And I'm like, are there human beings here? And they're like, yeah. And well, then it works. It works in Africa, in Idaho, St. Louis, Maine. Like, yeah, I mean, but there is like, but I think that the strategic business thinkers understand that like you invest in a piece of equipment, it might not pay off for 3 or 5 years. Like you invest in an employee, there's a training time, there's all these other things, but you're right. Like most people think, well, I'm going to invest this money and I better see oak trees, but oak trees don't show up in a month. Oak trees show up over time. And so having that investment mindset of, hey, in fact, we won't take on clients that don't commit to 3 years. Because the last thing you want to do is take and go be Daddy Warbucks for 6 months and then go back to being Ebenezer Scrooge. People are like, oh, that was tactical. It wasn't who he is. Like, it needs to be, if you're a giver, if you're somebody who already has a dialed in business that's pretty solid, this is like the gasoline you pour on top of the fire. This isn't like, this won't save you. If you like have a sucky business, sucky practice, sucky firm, sucky services, like, but this is for the people that are like, hey, we have a good product, but people just don't advocate. We don't get as many referrals as we want. You know, that's why we have this, we did a course of referrals without asking, because most people struggle with referrals. It's why we give away our whole blueprint. If somebody wants to take exactly what we do and charge tens of thousands of dollars as a client, your guys could go download the whole thing for free, giftologysystem.com. Go to download it all. And what's people are like, why would you give that away? And I'm like, because it's not hard to do for one person. It's hard to do if you got 20. What if you got 20 employees? What if you got 50 clients? People start cutting corners. They don't handwrite the notes. They don't personalize the gift with the spouse's name. And then they'll come back to me like, John, I downloaded your system. Giftology doesn't work. I'm like, show me the formula. Tell me what you did. They're like, well, I did this. And I'm like, that's not the formula. They're like, well, it's giftology-ish. Why isn't it working? And I'm like, it's like baking bread. You could bake it 100,000 times, but if you don't put yeast in every time, don't expect bread. You know, matzah, like, but that bread. And so it's all of the little things in relationship building. It's like people, you know, judge a book by its cover. They judge you, are your shoes shined? They judge, like, how do you speak? How do you handle yourself? Like, all the little things applied with even more so with a physical, tangible gift. And so people are like, well, John, it didn't work. I'm like, no, like you took your clients to the Super Bowl and then you like decided to like do the junior varsity level gift. Don't expect anybody to be blown away. Yeah. They're just not, because they're human beings. And most people are dealing with affluent people that can afford what they want, right? They don't need more crap. They don't need more stuff. None of us do. You know, like most people are going to Goodwill once a month with all the crap that they get or have too much of. But we all have room for a thoughtful artifact. And to your point on like, it's the thought that counts. Like, imagine if you told your wife, like, hey, honey, here's a card. I didn't sign it. Here's a gift card. Go buy your own thing. Like, it's thought that counts, right? No, it's a thoughtful thought that counts in a marriage and in a client relationship and in an employee relationship. So many people will say, you know, yeah, do I appreciate the thought? Yes. But I appreciate 1,000 times more when somebody puts the thoughtful thought and energy and intention into something. And because then you feel heard and seen and known and appreciated. And now you don't have gift guilt. Like the amount of stuff that people send me and I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, this is half baked. This is like, you just sent this out to 200 people and didn't take the time to know my wife's name was with an A, not an E. Like, you didn't do the work. Don't expect the fruit if you don't do the work.
Yep. So true. I love that, putting the thoughtful thought into it. And you mentioned something earlier, and I'll wrap up with this. You know, gratitude is a verb, right? You know, you have to express that. It's a feeling that you get. You can't just go around and say, I'm a grateful person, or I'm going to express gratitude. And it's, people feel that, it's real. And I think what you're doing is incredible, man. I think, albeit not a revolutionary idea, nobody does it and does it to the extent and level that you've put the thought into it. And I think it's amazing. And man, what an opportunity you have, because I agree with you 1,000%. The bar is so low that it doesn't take much to engage into this. Follow your system, follow your processes and methodology. But brother, I appreciate you being on the show. I love sitting back as a St. Louisan and see my brethren across the river just do some crazy, awesome things with your career. Keep influencing, keep getting after it. I'm super proud of you, man. And thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, dude, thanks for being in my corner. It's guys like you that have been believing in me before there were sparks. So dude, I don't take that for granted.
Well, appreciate everything that you're doing, brother. Love you. We'll catch up soon and talk to you then. Thanks.
Cool. Yep.